I don't know if there's any team in Europe, and if there are any, there are very few, like less than a handful of teams who are just able to flip a switch on and off the way Real Madrid are. And when I mean it on and off, I mean when it's off, it's off. It's off and it's pitch black. It's dark. There's no source of light. But then when it's on, it's like the sun blaring in the room, like just blinding. And that was the contrast between first half and second half. That's part of the reason why I wasn't too panicky at halftime. I know there was a lot of panic, a lot of doom and gloom, and a lot of people just worried. But and it's not that I wasn't worried, but I was like, there was a lot of room for a comeback, in my opinion, and I felt relatively calm about that. And partly because obviously Sevilla deserved their 2-0 halftime lead, but I actually wasn't that impressed with them. I don't know, as weird as that sounds. I thought they were good, obviously, and they earned that 2-0 lead, and I thought there were particularly a few things that were really hurting us. But you know, especially the way they ended that half, they were just giving us lifeline after lifeline after lifeline, giving these balls to us straight at our feet, like especially the last 5 minutes of the first half. They were just giving the ball away prolifically, and we hadn't capitalized yet at that point. But I definitely saw enough there that I was like, we can improve on this. But it required some changes from Ancelotti at halftime, which were very important, which we'll get to. And it just required capitalizing on certain things. But why don't we rewind it a little bit? Let's start with the starting lineup, because that was obviously a source of discussion. Rather than going with Nacho at left back, Ancelotti decided to go with Carvajal at left back, with Lucas Vazquez at the right back position. And then obviously, naturally, with Casemiro being suspended, we were wondering, okay, who's going to play the anchor role? What is the lineup going to be? And I think he went with a kind of predictable thing there in midfield. Like, we all kind of assumed that Fede would continue playing at right wing, and then the rest of it kind of picks itself if you're going with a 4-3-3. Modric, Kroos, Camavinga. As always, when that is a midfield trident, then you're just kind of wondering, okay, who's going to be Casemiro? Or sorry, was it going to be Kroos or Camavinga playing the six? So why don't you give us your assessment of the starting lineup?
I felt like Ancelotti decided to reward good performances and built a lineup based on merit. And so he found a way to fit everyone in that really performed well in the last match against Chelsea. And honestly, coming when the lineup first came out, and I kind of put the pieces together and realized one of Carvajal or Lucas Vazquez is at left back, I liked it. I honestly liked it. I think the thing, and then when we saw the game live, we saw Carvajal at left back, and we saw Camavinga as the number 8 and Toni Kroos as the DM, which is something we've all been calling for. And then I think as the game wore on, one thing that kind of dawned on me was we know how it is in Seville, and kind of that atmosphere at the Stadium de Sanchez Pizjuan, and just how that it's like an inferno there. And it started to dawn on me, maybe this isn't the best match. As great as he's been against elite opposition, and as great as he's been this year in integrating, I just felt like maybe you don't throw a rookie in there, a 19-year-old Camavinga, into that type of performance and into that type of atmosphere. And I felt like his performance did suffer. He couldn't get on the ball as much as he wanted. It didn't help that his midfield teammates, Kroos and Modric, were giving the ball away at an abnormal rate. I tweeted out at halftime that they gave the ball away 16 times in that half. Modric gave it away 10 times. Kroos gave it away 6. Over the whole 120 minutes against Chelsea, they only gave it away 19 times. Yes, Kroos was subs out, but still, it puts it in perspective. And so I think that midfield just wasn't clicking, and Camavinga himself it didn't look like the confidence was there like it was in previous matches. And as soon as he got that yellow card, I knew, and just the way the game was going, I knew Carlo Ancelotti was yanking him at halftime. I knew it. And I'm sure many people thought it as well. And it was just one of those games where, looking back in hindsight, at first thought I really liked the lineup, but looking back in hindsight, maybe I think to myself, was Camavinga really the guy there? But I don't know. I think given his performances, it was merited. It just, maybe you don't throw a rookie out there.
Well, the important thing is that I think the adjustments were ultimately made before it was too late. And this was one of the Carlos quotes from, remember when he first signed. I think it was actually his very first press conference where he was saying, or maybe what definitely wasn't his first press conference. Actually, it was maybe like a few weeks in, and he was saying it's not how you start games; it's about how you finish games. And so I think the correct adjustments were made in that regard. I didn't have too many problems with the starting lineup, and I mean, but although I definitely was surprised that Nacho didn't start and Carvajal got the nod there. But I think there's a lot in what you said. But I want to circle back to Camavinga for a sec, and I was curious to know, like, forget the fact that he was subbed at halftime, and some of the context behind that is obviously the fact that he was basically flirting with a red card. And as much as we can complain about that Vinicius handball, let's not kid ourselves that we probably should have been down 10 men by halftime, which could have been game over at that point. So we dodged a bullet there, as much as we can complain about Vinicius's goal being disallowed. But what was your assessment of his just performance in a vacuum? Because I actually I don't think it was like a Camavinga masterclass by any means, but I actually thought he was doing some good things out there. Some nice dribbling out of pressure, opening up his body while switching it to the open Vasquez, Modric kind of tandem on that right side. Good off-ball movement, even though he didn't get the ball on some occasions. But I think part of this was also a bit of a collective mess. I mean, if you look at the structure of the team, pressing again wasn't good. And even those giveaways from Sevilla out of the back, a lot of those were unpressured. They were just weird, sloppy mistakes from everyone from Koundé to Diego Carlos to even some of their midfielders, Rakitic, and I think we just didn't really test them that much. And that right side, kind of all over the place, because I asked you about Camavinga, but I'm going to actually follow it up with a second question to throw on you here. But on that right side, Matt, if you look at Acuna, he was actually really deep in this game, and he didn't get into the final third that much. And I'm not sure we tested him that much in the first half. And I think that was part of the reason why I was pretty excited about Rodrigo coming in at halftime was Fede was actually playing deeper. Modric was kind of the one who was playing the more attacking position in this game. And we just weren't getting much to test Acuna. Modric would sometimes make this run on the right side, try to get across, and I thought Acuna actually defended that pretty well. And Modric himself was uncharacteristically killing some attacks with some bad passes. And Lucas Vázquez wasn't providing any overloads, and that's partly because Sevilla were very dangerous on the wings in the counterattack, probably. But what was just the structure, the positioning of these players? And don't get into the Cruz defensive midfielder thing yet, but just the structure of maybe the positioning of the right side and Camavinga's performance as a whole.
Yeah, so I immediately noted, and if you look at the position maps after the game, at least from the first half, you can see that Fede Valverde really didn't stick to the right wing much at all. And there were sequences where I remember him over on the left, like combining with Camavinga and Vinicius. And so more often than not, though, he was playing in that central position, and we just packed the midfield. And it didn't necessarily, I wouldn't say it didn't work, because I actually thought first 10 minutes or so, Lucas Vázquez I was thinking to myself, okay, he's got the whole flank to himself. He's going to have to be able to maraud down that flank and provide an outlet both defensively and offensively. And he was doing that. He was able to provide that threat. I thought he made a lot of there was a couple really good runs he made off the shoulder of Sevilla's back line that Cruz just either didn't see it, or he decided he couldn't pull the pass off. But he made some great runs. And so I was like, okay, I think maybe this can work. You're sacrificing a right winger and you're putting a lot of responsibility on Lucas, but right now he can make that work. But I think eventually we just really struggled to play out of the back today. And whether you want to credit that to Sevilla's counter press or just the players being off in the first half with some sloppy passes, we couldn't get out. And I think some of that sometimes has to do with Fede Valverde defensively. He's so disciplined and he's willing to do that defensive work, but sometimes I think he plays too far back. He's almost in line with our defensive line, and whether that's instruction from Ancelotti or not, I think it pushes it pushes us almost just outside of our box. I'd rather we push our lines forward and maybe take 10 meters forward rather than defending so close to our box. And I think it invites the other team to take on that protagonist role and to try and dominate possession and put more pressure on us. And it's harder to get out of the back when you have so many players playing behind the ball. And so from that perspective, I think that kind of hurt us, and that midfield setup hurt us. And that's why there was such a difference when Rodrigo came on, because not only did he stay wide, but he stayed high and wide. And so that gave us a constant outlet, somebody to feed, somebody for Acuna or, God, I'm going to butcher this guy's name. Who's the other left back that came in? Augustinsson. Ludwig Augustinsson.
It sounds right.
He came in, and I mean, he got burned left and right by Rodrigo as well. But both of them, it pinned them back. It forced them. They couldn't make those overlaps. They couldn't get into the final third at all because Rodrigo was staying high up there. So it was the right adjustment. I guess it's just the question then comes, Keon, is should we start Fede Valverde as a right winger? Does he deserve to be a starter? Like, if Ancelotti does his week in, week out Gala 11, does Fede deserve to start in that right wing, or should it only be for specialty games?
Okay, so I think you can start him at the right wing, but today he wasn't really starting at the right wing. And you talked about some of his positional things, and that one of the things about Fede that I've really noticed lately is that defensively, we give him credit for as a two-way player, which he is, but some of his defensive positioning hasn't been great in the past few games. Against PSG, against Chelsea, and today against Sevilla. I also thought he had a couple gambles where he steps up at the wrong time and we break, and Sevilla have a nice easy pass down the wing and they can get a cross in. And I think Fede, but the thing is, what makes him so good as a two-way player is that he's a fighter and ball carrier. So, like, if you give him a 50-50 duel to fight through, he's going to come out on top. And if you give him the ball and ask him to carry the ball 40 yards, he can do that at a really, really great level. But some of his positional things in a deeper role has been kind of hit or miss. Camavinga's kind of been in that situation as well, by the way. But that's why I think I don't understand why you have Modric in that advanced role. I think Modric makes more sense to play. Like, you gotta switch that. Modric should be the deeper player, and Fede should be the one in the more attacking box-to-box role, where Modric can play quarterback, but he can also cover for the fullback a little better. Positionally, he's a bit better too. And I also think, like, Modric is great and multidimensional as he is and versatile as he is. I don't know if you want to resort him at just being kind of like a right winger where he just crosses. He can do that at such a great level too, but I think he can just do so much more. So I think you can play him on the right wing, but also just play him on the right wing when you play him there. Do you know what I mean? If that makes sense. I think we should talk about the Cruz Camavinga thing, because this has been a hot topic. I'm curious to know where you stand on it, because I kind of have my answer to this, but I'm curious to know what you think. But, like, what is the solution if Casemiro doesn't play? Like, what's your best thing you can put out there?
Yeah, and I don't know if you noticed. Did you notice that Carlos switched them back in like the 35th minute? Camavinga started playing DM and Cruz was the 8. So he obviously felt like that wasn't working. Without Casemiro, I mean, you look at the midfield in the second half, and that honestly worked. But I do think the Cruz, DM, Camavinga, and Modric midfield with Fede as a right winger can work. I do think in the right context it can work. With enough reps, with enough time, it can get there. I don't know that today was the right kind of experimental environment for that. I don't know. What's your take, yeah?
So I think that, first of all, like, answering like the question of what's the solution to playing without Casemiro is a lot like saying, what do you do if all of your wingbacks are injured? Who's the backup to Mendy? there is no real solution because your squad is built the way it is. So the solution ideally is to sign somebody for that game, but you can't do that. So I think it's a double-edged sword. No matter what you decide to do, it's going to be a problem. So if you decide to go with Kroos as the 6, the issue is, and Militao got a lot of heat in this game, especially in the first half, obviously. And I didn't really see it the same way. I mean, I thought there was some bad luck there. I think there were a lot of collective collapses. But one thing that wasn't discussed on the second goal that Real Madrid conceded, and everyone got mad at Militao for not keeping up with, who was it? Who was it that Militao lost? Was it Martial? I can't even remember.
Corona.
Oh, okay. So on that sequence, Militao got a lot of heat, right? He should have done better. I don't disagree with that. But if you look at Kroos in that position, and usually we can take it for granted because Casemiro's there mopping it up, but Kroos neither blocks the passing lane to the cutback, but given the fact that the cutback was intercepted anyway, I think by Courtois, Kroos should at least use that time to react quicker and close Lamela, and he didn't do either of those things. And that's just kind of Kroos' defensibility in a nutshell. It's not what he's good at. I think we take it for granted Casemiro would have instinctually reacted to that much better and possibly prevented that goal. But I think if you're going to play Kroos as the anchor, you have to play a completely different style of football. You have to play like Manchester City style of football or Barcelona style of football, where you have literally Busquets or Rodri just pinging passes, and the team, you limit him getting tested because just by keeping control of the ball and counter-pressing and winning the ball in the final third, so that the teams lose the ball in their own third rather than having a chance to break and expose Kroos. That's the way you have to play. But if you have him there and you're kind of chasing shadows and playing the same way you would if Casemiro was there, that becomes problematic. And so that, like, we don't have a Casemiro anchor, and I don't care how many people say it. Camavinga is not that player either. That's just not his role. Camavinga needs to be higher up the pitch. He needs to break lines with his dribbling, with his movement. And I think it's just dangerous having them in that role because he also doesn't have the long-range passing as a Kroos type player either. So I don't think there is a solution, is my point. You just have to pick your poison. And if you're going to play the way Real Madrid style football, which is a lot of ways tactical chaos and some shithousery, but also flipping switches on and off and individual brilliance and all that stuff, Casemiro fits that role. Obviously, he doesn't give you other things like, passing and press resistance, but it's just no matter what you decide to do there, it's a double-edged sword in my opinion.
Well, look at the second half is a perfect example of how to play without Casemiro and with Kroos at the DM. We counter-pressed perfectly. Like, that was some of the best counter-pressing I've seen Real Madrid do. And we locked Sevilla in. They had the only opportunity they had was that big Rafa Mir chance that he headed over the bar. Other than that, they were suffocated. They couldn't get out of their half. And that's the way you have to play if you're going to play with Kroos at the DM position. And it worked. It worked perfectly. We scored 3 goals unanswered.
So, what else did you think was a theme in the first half that we didn't discuss in terms of what we were doing wrong then? We may have actually addressed most of it, but there's probably something.
Yeah. I mean, we can focus on the goals because you were talking about it a little bit there. I agree with you. I think that first goal doesn't happen if Casemiro's in the team, because part of what went wrong there was
second goal.
Second goal, yes. Yeah. Sorry, second goal. Part of what went wrong there was you see that crossfield switch. The ball came from our left flank, crossfield to the right side of the pitch, and so Militao and Lucas Vazquez both are shifting over. But if you look at the initial gap between Militao and Lucas Vazquez, it's huge. And I think we were pointing that out on one of the Zoom podcasts too, about how like that gap. There's just a huge hole, and I think it was from Nacho stepping out. But in this regard, there was just a natural gap between the two, and you always want to limit the space in between your 4 defenders, because that way you limit the opportunity for through balls or runs to be played into those spaces. And so Lucas Vazquez goes kind of sheds over to the right wing to shut down 1v1. I think it was Corona probably, and then Militao comes over, or maybe Acuna, sorry, and then Militao comes over, and Alaba, the whole back line shifting over. But if you think about where Casemiro would have been positioned in that play, he would have been positioned as part of the back line. We see him just gradually move into like a fifth center back position so often because he recognizes when the opposition's playing four attackers against your back four, then you don't need to be in that midfield holding position. Just drop into the back line and plug those holes. And so I don't think that goal would have happened if Casemiro was involved in this one. But that being said, I think Millie and the follow up. Sorry, I'm all over the place right now. But the follow up to that is also that Casemiro probably would have covered one of the Lamela, whoever took the shot there, unlike Cruz, who just kind of let him waltz into the box and take that shot easily.
Yeah.
And then obviously I know a lot of people were focused on Militao. I think that, yeah, I mean, he's got to do better there. He's got to do better. And same thing on the first goal. He comes out of the wall, jumping out of the wall, and Modric just gave him an earful after that. And these are just little mistakes, stupid little mistakes. And we've talked about it on this podcast before that he is very prone to do those types of things. And it has hurt us in big matches before. It will continue to hurt us if he doesn't eventually work his way out of this. I think he's done overall. You look at this season, Militao's been great. We look at it in a vacuum. We look at a big picture. He's been great. But there are these small details and these mistakes that he makes pretty consistently that does worry you. And that does worry you going into a semifinal Champions League match against Manchester City. And so these are things that you hope over the next few seasons he can grow out of, though.
Yeah, well, it's a weird one. And the reason I tried to take some of the focus off of Militao is not to say Militao was blameless. It's just to I always just like to point out other stuff because I think people sometimes forget to look at the whole holistic process of what's going on here. And if you look at Sevilla's build-up on that sequence, there's a lot of space between the lines and a lot of confusion on who's marking who. And the other one that we didn't really talk about in this particular sequence, we can talk about Militao's stretch there. And by the time he gets there, it's a nice touch by Corona, and he gets past him with a nice little kind of shoulder drop with ease, it should be noted. But with Cruz also not marking, Carvajal is another one that's not tracking there either. And I think they're not getting as much heat, but I think Cruz and Carvajal on that particular defensive sequence should get probably equal amount of heat too, because I think a lot of these things could have been prevented. And it's not just on Militao getting beat by Corona there. The wall, you mentioned it briefly. I actually still haven't seen a replay of that yet. I'm going to actually look it up while you explain it. But what happened in that wall for the Rakitic goal?
So Militao, I don't really know what he was doing or what he was thinking in this sequence, but he basically, I guess he's thinking he can attack the ball and close down the space if he jumps at it. But he basically runs out from the wall, tries to jump out at Rakitic's free kick, and that's exactly where I think it's exactly where the ball goes, in between that space where he jumps out. And because he broke the wall, it goes right in between that space. Courtois can't see it, and it's in the back of the net.
I'm watching it now. I think I still don't have the great replay on mine, but yeah, it's just a weird thing. I mean, jumping out like that is strange because you're just taught to kind of jump up vertically if you're going to jump at all. And it just parted. It parted ways, like as if it was an ocean parting ways for Moses in that situation. All right. So anything else from the first half that you wanted to address?
The other thing, I just felt like nothing was clicking offensively, and we only had one shot on target in the first half. And I think it was that long range volley from Benzema outside the box. And then the second half, we doubled our total shots. So we went from 5 shots in the first half to 10 total, 5 on target. It's still hard to wrap your head around how just what a mindset shift it
Yeah.
was in the second half. Like it really, everything completely changed. Everything about the performance from the first whistle changed, and the team was infinitely better. It was a dominant performance, and the stats kind of back it up as well.
So, if I could just add to that, like my summary of the first half in a nutshell would be everything you just said, plus the issue of the defensive midfielder slot with not having Casemiro there. You saw kind of the defensive dominoes. That was rectified quite a bit in the second half, as we already discussed. Rodrigo coming on and testing Acuna much more was huge and giving us more width and more of a dribbling, incisive, line-breaking threat on that side. And also, part of the other problem in the first half was everyone was just kind of bad from an individual standpoint. The passing from Modric was uncharacteristically poor. Even some of the simple passes in transition killed our attacks. And Vinicius was highly ineffective. Benzema was ineffective. And I think this is interesting because, and also the other thing that changed at halftime, we can talk about the Rodrigo sub, but Papu Gomez coming out at halftime helped us quite a bit too, because I think he was hurting us with some vertical passes in the first half. So him coming off injured was something that actually played in our favor as well. But Vinicius, it's funny because
Martial got injured too, right?
Martial got injured, before the second half even started, before halftime. Yeah, he came off.
Well, that honestly, like that was the Camavinga tackle. There's a pre and post that tackle and pre and post that decision. Like I think you already mentioned it. That would have changed everything. But it was clear as to, like I thought even when I saw it in live time that no way Camavinga got the ball, and then you look at the replay, he didn't get anywhere near the ball, and so we definitely dodged a bullet there.
Well, it's funny because I actually fear Rafa Mir a little bit more than I fear Martial. So I was like, oh, okay, so maybe that one actually felt like might help Sevilla in some ways. But Mir, I mean, credit to Militao, who actually had a better second half, and him and Alaba both had some good defensive sequences on Rafa Mir to prevent some breaks, but we also let Rafa Mir have an open header, which you already mentioned that he put over the bar. So I thought about your tweet from the Chelsea game when you asked, should Vinicius stay in the game? Is he going to have his moment? I thought about that tweet of yours because like 50th, 60th minute or whatever it was, I was like, Vinicius has been pretty ineffective. He's struggling. Sevilla are sending good help defense on him. Every time he cuts in, there's a second man there to dispossess him or intercept a pass or take the ball away from him. But he had at least 2 moments in this game. Because I think, did he not have the hockey assist for Rodrigo's goal? And then I think he had the hockey assist for 2 goals in this game, actually.
Yeah, both like nice little technical flicks.
Yeah. So does this qualify as Vinicius having moments when he's not necessarily doing much else?
Yeah, and I mean, obviously the goal that was wrongly disallowed, in my opinion.
That's right. Yeah, that's true.
So yeah,
I'm being unfair. And also he had, sorry to interject, but he also had one really impressive defensive challenge on Jesus Navas later in the game too, which, so the work ethic is there. It's not, I just mean the offensive efficiency side.
I don't think you're off though, because I was kind of feeling the same way. I was like, I just feel like we're not getting enough out of Vinicius. We're not getting enough. And then, and sometimes it looks like he's just dead exhausted, like he's so tired, and then it'll be the 80th minute and he goes on a sprint down the left wing. You're like, where did this come from? It looked like you were dead tired 20 minutes ago, and now you're burning past guys again. So
it's the Modric
I don't know. Yeah. He gets better as the game wears on. That's when he starts to play his best, and it was true in this game, at least. I think some of the flicks, the combination with Rodrigo, obviously the chemistry with Carvajal. I think we should talk about that. Like, I actually thought Carvajal at left back, at least chemistry wise, with Vinicius was better than we've seen with any other left back since this whole season.
Me or you would have better chemistry with Vinicius than Mendy would out there. You in particular, because you're actually a left back. But all those things were interesting to me. And it should be, and I don't know, I assume this has been talked about because, again, after the game, I had to rush to the hotel to record this podcast. So I haven't seen much post-game stuff. But this is the second time this season we've beaten Sevilla at the death, because the first game in the Bernabeu against Sevilla was that crazy Vinicius game winner in the 87th minute, right? So this is the second time we put a sword through their hearts at the end of the game. Also, this is
Poor
just
Lopetegui.
he's the only one I always feel bad for. Such a good person. Listen, this is a classic. I mean, you've been watching Real Madrid for many years, as I have. I felt like it's a type of stadium, Sanchez-Pizjuan, where Sevilla are the type of team at home, when they score one, they can score 3 or 4 in the span of 20 minutes. But when things go wrong, they can also feel the pressure of the fans and things slipping by them. It's kind of like the Bernabeu in that sense, where they can really ride the wave of the home fans. But yeah, I feel like I've watched this game before. I feel like I've seen it. I don't know if I've seen a crazy comeback like this, but I've definitely seen the movie of Sevilla scoring one goal, the crowd going crazy, then they score another goal, and it's like that. But I think that maybe, again, circles back to our mental fortitude to come out to reverse this whole thing and come out on top at the end of it.
Yeah, I feel like Sevilla Real Madrid games, at least for the last, at least 10 years, maybe 15 years, have been really, really fun. And there's some games where, especially at the Sanchez-Pizjuan, where like that intensity, that environment, the stadium, everything, like it falls apart, and Real Madrid end up losing by 2, 3, 4 goals. Like that's happening. That can happen. But then there's other games where it's like this, where it's 3-2s, 2-2s, you name it, 2-1s. And I thought of in this particular match, because when we were down at 2-0, like it just wasn't going well. I thought back to that performance in 2007. The only difference, obviously, or big difference, was it was at the Santiago Bernabeu, where Guti comes on in the second half, and we did this on a historical pod. I argue that it's one of the best substitute appearances ever, at least I've seen in my lifetime, where Guti comes on and just completely changes that game. And we win it 3-2. We were down 2-0 just like this, and win it 3-2. And this second half, I mean, Rodrigo, credit to him, because his performance, you could argue, for me, it's not quite at Guti's level in that game, but it was up there in terms of substitute impact and turning the tide of this match. And he had 2 assists, obviously, and just integral part of the turnaround. And in a harder environment. It wasn't at home; it was away in Seville.
I actually just pulled up my historical Real Madrid matches document of that podcast we did about that particular game in the 2006-2007 season. Apparently, it was also a Cannavaro masterclass. Had a really good defensive game, and then just Guti, a bunch of notes on him on his insane passing and assists. So yeah, I this was an incredible second half performance. This was amazing. Maybe we should just focus on Rodrigo, actually, because I think he is deservedly going to be one of the headliners of this game, other than the fact that Benzema obviously just shows up at the end. A game that he wasn't playing particularly well in either. His passing was a little bit off. And again, I think I mentioned this to you on a recent post-game podcast. If anyone's allowed to have some bad performances here and there, or some like human performances, it's him. But he still came good. Why don't you tell us? You kind of mentioned it, actually, but is there anything to add about Rodrigo in this game?
I love his attitude. He's now almost feels like he is a pure right winger. I know that's not his natural position, but I feel like he's developing into a pure right winger, because some of the skill set he uses, or some of the technical skills he uses, are that of an out and out right winger, right-footed right winger. And he just put that left back Acuna and then Augustinsson, just put him on skates time and time again. He would cut inside, outside, take him by a line, get by him. I mean, the third goal was a perfect moment where I don't think Rodrigo really gets credit for. I mean, he's not thought about in terms of like his change of pace or his acceleration that much, but you look at him in that moment and he just physically outmatches Augustinsson. And so it was a great ball, great composure. Same thing on the first goal. I mean, we talked about how many times have we talked about on the podcast? I know Ohms kind of made the point many times about that run from the right wing all the way over to
Yep.
the near post. That's his run, and he makes it. And usually it's a decoy run in open space for Benzema at the back post, like it did against Chelsea. But this time he actually got the ball and he put it in the back of the net. Coming off a big substitute performance, obviously against Chelsea as well. This has been a big momentum week for and PSG. I mean, he's turned it around. He's obviously Asensio's moved down the pecking order with the performances of Fede Valverde and Rodrigo on the right wing, and so this was a statement match for him. The last 3 big matches have been statement matches from him, and I think he's proved his worth again. I think a lot of people were starting to doubt Rodrigo or doubt what he can bring to the table, but it's so easy to forget how young he still is. I mean, he's a year younger than Vinicius even, and he's still. I mean, players aren't gonna. We talk about how Vinicius skipped developmental phases, like he just went from 0 to 5 really quickly. And so if Vinicius went to 0 to 5, maybe Rodrigo takes those developmental phases a little bit more gradual. And so I think if we can be patient with him, there's still a lot of upside there.
I think he's also just really smart. He's a smart player, and I think also just when you can kind of see the effect that Benzema has on players like him, just to stay composed. I thought the cutback to Benzema was also a very composed cutback, much like the finish was, not rushing the shot, dropping the shoulder, taking his time. It was just he's a smart player, and that run he makes from that far post to the near post, it's like it makes me just want to go and play football and practice that run myself. It makes me just want to go on the wing and have someone cross it and just make that run to the near post. It does so much damage. It's just such a simple thing, but it makes sense, right? I mean, football is simple sometimes. You make the run to the near post, you're either getting the ball yourself or you're dragging a defender away for someone to make something happen at the far post. So it's a simple run, but so effective. In a game like this, am I allowed to ask